Hey, what's up, intro policy students? Hope you're doing great, getting along well throughout the semester, and learning a lot about public policy in your research area. So, hope you're doing great with all of that. I wanted to stop in today with a little supplementary information around actor interaction and policy change. I know you're working on this for your papers. We talked a little bit about it here and there. It's in some of the literature. Much of the stuff, the details don't come until later in the book. They're in like the second to last chapter, and so feel free to read ahead, of course. But I just wanted to kind of reinforce some of the main points as you're working through putting together your papers and this kind of next step of the writing project that you're working on right now. So let's just work through a few of these. It won't take but just a few minutes, and I'll have some extra handouts and materials for you posted to Canvas site for you to check out. All right. So here's just the brief thing. I've already shared this a while ago, and I just want to make sure that we could talk through it a little bit. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about these things. Again, for your paper, you should probably choose one or two of these to, at least one for sure, maybe two, to explain what's going on with your public policy, how we got to this standpoint where we are, and where you think it may be going next, or just what are the features that led to the current policy or to the arguments around it, or the people that form and debate and engage in the conflict around creating public policies. So we're going to go through just these few. There's several different ways in the policy literature to think about policy change and modeling how it occurs, and numerous theories. They're all kind of getting at the same idea of what features of the policy process, what characteristics are necessary components to lead to either policy stasis or policy change. And all of them kind of model that in a different way. So just a refresher, we've talked about policy actors, official and unofficial actors. The advocacy coalition framework. This is kind of the one of the starting points that has the kind of key focus on the actors within what's called a policy subsystem. So that's like a area of a public policy that is being currently debated, contested, has a group of actors competing and compromising. Any of your kind of the policies that you're working on for your papers are kind of a policy subsystem. So there's like a larger policy domains, right? And then there's like subdomains, and then there's like, we can model these as systems of interaction within those subdomains. So the actors are forming coalition based on their shared beliefs and their shared interests. And these coalitions, it's modeled through this framework, compete and compromise. So now we're talking about actors as groups. And what brings them together are their beliefs. They have either deep core beliefs, their fundamental aspects, their fundamental beliefs, their worldviews. A lot of these are kind of connected to their political philosophy and how they view the necessary role of government. It could connect to certain sociological aspects, political aspects, cultural aspects, religious aspects, right? But these kind of deep-held worldviews about the way things should be. Then there's policy core beliefs, like the things that a particular type of policy that the actors may want. They may come together based on their core beliefs about the type of policy they want, or the type of policy change they want to see around this type of policy, right? So their core beliefs can bring together actors to form coalition based on their fundamentals. The policy core beliefs can bring together actors based on their strategic position within a policy area. And the secondary aspects are kind of more surface level things that the actors can agree on and come together over, directly connected to the strategies and the procedures and the kind of a particular action on a certain policy. Let's clear this up with some discussion here. So climate change policy is my example here. So you have a couple coalitions, right? You have a pro-mitigation coalition, right? These are the kind of environmental, non-governmental organizations, climate scientists, renewable energy companies. Then you have a coalition of economic prioritization, the fossil fuel industry, some labor unions, policymakers. So you can see that there are core beliefs that bring them together. Pro-mitigation, urgent action needed to address climate change. For the other group, the economic prioritization group, the core belief is economic growth should not be sacrificed for climate action. Right? So this brings together these groups based on that core belief. Now what they're going to do, they'll have a policy level belief, what they want to do around a particular area, and then a policy secondary aspect belief about how they're going to do it. Right? And so these things can bring actors together. Core beliefs are more long-standing and hold coalitions together longer. Policy core beliefs can bring together a coalition seeking the same policy objective, even if they have opposite and opposed core beliefs. Those coalitions last for a shorter amount of time. The next one is incrementalism. This is just like the idea that little bit of change happens in increments over time. This is a theory proposed by Charles Lindblom, and it's the idea that decision makers kind of muddle through the day-to-day crises and make little adjustments rather than radical changes. And his kind of Lindblom's consideration here is that we have a kind of series of a few different alternatives, and so the focus would be pick the one that's the least bit different from what we're doing now, and try it and see if that works. And then if it doesn't, adjust it to the next little small different one, right? So there's this kind of series of successive limited comparisons where you're kind of limiting the various options and not changing too much from status quo so that you don't just kind of screw everything up, right? So it's a very risk-adverse approach. It's a very practical one for politics, too. This is the way that most of our policy change occurs in the United States. We can't really it's rare that we focus on the really big things, right? The big, we need to do this because of X, Y, or Z, right? So let's do it, like a moonshot, like Kennedy saying, let's land on the moon in 10 years, right? It's rare those things happen. So most of the time, incrementalism leads the day because it is easy to get enough people on board for a very small change, because it reduces their risk of losing political capital. So here's one example of incremental change over time around minimum wage policy. So you have the initial state, and then you make these kind of little small adjustments, right, to reduce risk, reduce political opposition, provide for opportunities to adjustment and adapting to it over time, rather than some radical change of we're at $7.25 an hour now, let's go to $10 an hour immediately. Those are pretty low prices, but that's the federal minimum wage. The states add on a lot of their own minimum wage too. The next idea here is punctuated equilibrium theory. This builds on incrementalism, right? The incrementalism is the foundation for this idea, and the fact that we regularly follow this kind of incremental pattern of policy change, little changes here and there. And then, but punctuated equilibrium says that, okay, if the incrementalism is an equilibrium, something happens and it punctuates that, right? Something triggers in this kind of timeline of regular incrementalism a big event that necessitates a large change. So policy change occurs in this kind of significant leaps after a period of stability. And so there's a couple different ways. Policy monopolies, we've already talked about that with the notion of winners and losers and conflict. If they're broken up, that can lead to a punctuation, and it opens a space for it. But typically that policy monopoly is going to be so dominant over the policy area that it maintains and reinforces incrementalism, right? Maintains the status quo. The triggering event is something that can disrupt that. We can think of triggering events in all sorts of different ways. It could be a pandemic, right? It could be a earthquake. It could be a hurricane. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be potentially a very consequential election. It could be something that we move from being kind of in one state of equilibrium to another state, or to a state of disequilibrium before a return to equilibrium. And if you wonder why I'm moving my hand so much, I think that when we model these things, it looks like a cardiogram. So like a heart monitor, right, where you see the bump, 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 boom, boom, right? And so those kind of these kind of big pulses are kind of modeled over time in a policy area, kind of in a timeline of punctuations and status quo. So example here, financial regulation, kind of stable period before 2008, and then we have a huge global financial crisis in 2008, and that triggers a policy shift, enactment of very real and consequential public policy related to finance regulation to try to prevent another financial crisis like the one in 2008. You could also think of any number of the pandemic things that we lived through, right? That we have all of a sudden we have this kind of standard normal healthcare kind of for most of our lives, and then a pandemic happens. This is the triggering event, and all of a sudden now we have things that we've never done before, right? Lockdowns, masks, work from home, telehealth, right? All these changes were triggered through this kind of punctuation in our equilibrium. The next one here is the three streams and policy windows approach. And this kind of also builds on the incrementalism, right? This is the idea is that incrementalism modeled as occurring in three different streams that flow along, and the kind of typically the mix of what's going on in these streams is related to kind of how we understand problems, potential available solutions around what type of policies are out there, and the political climate, the political mood, the kind of number one issue that people are concerned about, or how they're concerned with a particular policy area, right? And so normally these things kind of flow along. And the theory here is that when the timing is right, when these streams align, when there is a problem recognition or a change in our definition of a problem, and now there's a solution available in this policy stream, and the political will is there to enact it, these streams flow together, is how they're perceived here. And that opens this window of opportunity for change, right? It opens up somebody to come out and say, hey, look, we're rethinking about this problem in a different way. We have this solution. We have the votes. We have the political will, the public's desire for it. Let's try to do it. So here's a cool example. Telehealth policy, right? This also kind of goes with the pandemic example that we're talking about, but the flowing in this problem stream typically over time has been rural healthcare access issues, and rising healthcare costs, and the ability for rural residents across the country to access quality healthcare. Right, and then kind of flowing along that same time is that there's advances in telemedicine technology, right? The telehealth services are being covered by insurance. So these policies are occurring. These problems are out there. And then the politics stream, right? People start recognizing, especially in a pandemic, that, hey, these folks out there in the rural areas need healthcare access. How do we achieve this? Oh, look, here's the solution. The telehealth companies or the medicine companies have been creating a wide range of new services. Let's kind of bring these things together. And so this kind of timing, this correct timing, the correct people, the correct solutions, the problem definition being realized opens this kind of policy window for rapid adoption of new policies during the pandemic, right? And now that the pandemic is past us, we're still using these kind of new telehealth policies. It's so nice to have a sick kid and not actually have to pack them up and take them to the doctor to get some cough medicine, right? You can dial in on your phone or your computer to see your doctor, right? This is kind of a result of that change, and let alone the access for rural Americans. So the policy window opens, and policy entrepreneurs, that's how we think about the actor here, advocate for this health expansion. They get the congresspersons on board for passing new legislation to allow this to actually occur in the U.S. And there you have it. So the Advocacy Coalition framework is kind of based on coalitions, the collection of people, the numbers. Numbers matter here. Incrementalism, this is how things normally occur. Building off incrementalism, when an event happens, right? And this event could be everybody's paying attention to something all of a sudden, right? Or we're kind of, the definition triggered us to think about a problem differently, or just some sort of external crisis or external exogenous shock happens, and like a for a local city or something, a shock of an earthquake, right? So it changes what they're doing about public policy, right? So this is kind of a timing effect. Another timing effect, kind of when the timing is right and the key actors are in place, and there's this kind of opportunity to make change. That's when Kingdon's model comes into place. So I have this handout. I'll put it on Canvas for you. And this is kind of comparing all of these things, right? So we see the core mechanism for change in each of the different approaches, the pace of change, the kind of how we consider the actors, how a crisis may impact these things, the time frame for the change, how we analyze the policy analysis, what we think about how rationality is determined, right, from our decision-making standpoint of view, and then also the view of power. And in this handout, I have some kind of cases that look at each of these areas. So a case on healthcare reform policy through all four lenses, and then a little bit of a strengths and limitations of each one. So look for that. All right, I hope this helps. I hope you enjoyed this short little extra video on policy change theories. Incorporate them into your paper and into your understanding of these things. Look for references, certainly in your textbook. It's in the second to the last chapter. And then, you'll be able to find them also in other lecture notes too. All right, thanks.